In early October 2015, a married couple from Milwaukee decided to divorce. The woman explained that her soon-to-be ex-husband had never been honest with her. She had always sensed an emotional wall between them, one she simply could not break through. He struggled with alcohol, insomnia, and his own thoughts. There was something deeply rooted within him that kept him from moving forward, from being truly happy. And at that point, she could take no more. For years, she had begged him to open up to her, to tell her the truth. But he never could. Finally, she reached her breaking point. Still, he pleaded with her, he didn't want to separate. He told her she was the love of his life and swore he would, at last, be honest. That's when he confessed. 33 years earlier, he had taken the life of a teenage girl. And since then, he hadn't slept peacefully a single night. Upon hearing this, the woman was stunned, completely frozen. At first, she thought he was lying. But then, seeing the seriousness in his face, she picked up the phone and called the police, repeating everything he had told her. But the officers didn't seem to believe her. No investigation was launched. Nothing was done. The case stalled right there. That same day, when he was left alone, the man called a crisis hotline, a suicide prevention service, and confessed again. This time, he said he didn't know what to do. He wasn't sure if he should come clean, try to move on, or stay silent forever. He didn't know whether to go out in a blaze of glory or vanish into obscurity. But one thing was clear, he couldn't go on living like this. Not satisfied with that, on Sunday, October 11th, he picked up the phone again, this time calling a television program. He stated plainly, "I want to confess to a crime." But once again, no one took him seriously. So, on October 13th, without hesitation, he walked into a police station. He approached the front desk and confessed that he had killed someone 30 years ago. However, when he provided the details, the officers couldn't place the case. Too many years had passed, and the victim's name didn't ring any bells. Still, he recounted the entire story and explained that he was finally coming forward because the ghost of his victim had never allowed him to rest, and that, since then, his life had been a living hell. And this is where today's chilling case begins. Carrie Anne Jopek was born on August 17, 1968, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was the eldest of two daughters born to Carolyn and Robert Jopek. Very little is known about her early childhood with her parents. But we do know that her mother retained custody after the separation. When Carrie was just 9 years old, her mother remarried. By the age of 13, Carrie was a lively, cheerful, and carefree girl. She loved drawing, painting, singing, and sculpting clay figures. According to her younger sister, Carrie was a role model, someone kind and incredibly generous. Her only flaw, if one could call it that, was that she could be a bit bossy and stubborn. Adolescence had begun to show its signs. Carrie had started talking back, ignoring rules, neglecting her homework, and frequently arriving home late. She often clashed with her parents, particularly with her stepfather, Fred, as she refused to accept his authority. She would remind him, time and again, that he was not her real father and had no right to discipline her or dictate her behavior. Yet, at the end of the day, Carrie had a good heart. After a few hours, she would come around and apologize sincerely. She was fully aware when she crossed the line or acted poorly. And once she calmed down, she would approach her parents and beg for forgiveness. By 1982, Carrie lived with her family on Meitel Street, a quiet, uneventful area, much like those often featured in movies. It was a peaceful neighborhood where everyone knew each other, lined with tidy houses and open front lawns without fences. The backyards had low fences, easy to see or hop over, allowing neighbors to chat casually. The green lawns were always well maintained, the houses neatly arranged, an idyllic setting for raising a family. Carrie's life couldn't have been more ordinary or serene, until Tuesday, March 16, 1982. That day was a school day, and as usual, Carrie and her younger sister Maggie had classes. Their school was just steps away from their home. At 13, Carrie was in the 7th grade at Kosciuszko Middle School. According to classmates, she was a good student, respectful, responsible, and usually punctual. That morning appeared entirely normal. She woke up early, had breakfast with her sister, and walked to school. Classmates noted that she seemed cheerful and calm during lessons, chatting with her friends. However, her demeanor changed drastically around 1 p.m. when a classmate, trying to be funny, threw paint on her. Carrie reacted by hitting him. The commotion drew the attention of several teachers, who stepped in to separate the students and impose disciplinary action. Carrie, however, was extremely agitated, shouting and visibly furious. She refused to back down, so the teacher decided to suspend her immediately. Although she soon apologized, lowered her tone, and pleaded for another chance, the teacher remained firm. He filled out the suspension slip, handed it to her, and asked her to collect her belongings and leave the premises for the rest of the week. Desperate to avoid being sent home, Carrie begged the teacher to reconsider. She apologized again and again, promising not to repeat her behavior. The teacher, suspecting she might never deliver the suspension notice, picked up the phone and called her mother. Carolyn was shocked. Left with no other option, Carrie reluctantly accepted the suspension notice, packed her bag, and walked out the door. Witnesses say she left with her head bowed. Carrie Jopek was livid. Over a bit of paint, her daughter had completely lost control. She couldn't comprehend why Carrie had reacted with such aggression. After all, it was just a stained shirt. Nothing that warranted violence or screaming. Determined to get answers, she stood at the front door with her arms crossed. The school was only a 2-minute walk from their home. She waited 2 minutes, then 5, 10, 20. Still, Carrie didn't appear. Worried, she opened the door and stepped outside, scanning both ends of the street. Carrie was nowhere to be seen. There was no sign of her anywhere. Carolyn stepped off the porch and kept looking, but there was no trace of Carrie Anne. She assumed her daughter was hiding nearby, perhaps trying to come up with a way to explain what had happened, likely afraid of being punished. So, Carolyn went back inside. Classes ended at 3:00 p.m., and she figured that maybe her daughter was waiting for her best friend Robin, who lived just across the street. At 3, Carolyn got up from the sofa, opened the door, and walked over to Robin's house. The girl came outside, and when asked, she said she hadn't seen Carrie that day. The last time she'd spoken to her was around 1:30 p.m., and she hadn't heard from her since. Once again, Carolyn assumed her daughter must be hiding somewhere nearby, and that eventually she'd come home. But the hours passed. 4 o'clock, 5, 6, and then Fred, Carrie's stepfather, returned from work. Carolyn explained what was going on, that Carrie was nowhere to be found. Together, they began knocking on every neighbor's door, rallying the entire neighborhood. Dozens of people scoured the area, rang doorbells, checked every bus stop, even went to the school. But night fell, and still there was no sign of Carrie. Most troubling of all was the fact that she was only 13 years old. Yes, she was beginning to rebel, talking back, challenging authority, but at the end of the day, she was still afraid of the dark. Carrie Anne Jopek was incapable of spending the night away from home. It was impossible, unthinkable. The following morning, Carolyn filed a missing person report. Unfortunately, the police did not view the case with the seriousness it deserved. They didn't see it for what it truly was: a young girl who had vanished, but rather as a moody preteen going through a rebellious phase. They assumed she had run away, was too proud to return, and was likely off partying with friends. As a result, they did not treat the case as urgent, and they overlooked 3 crucial facts. First, the school was only a few minutes away from home, and yet no one had seen her along the way. In such a small neighborhood, where everyone knew each other, someone should have noticed her. But no one said a word. Second, Carrie would have told someone if she had intended to run away. At the very least, she would have confided in her best friend Robin. They were neighbors and told each other everything. But that day, Carrie said nothing. Third, it simply wasn't in her character. She had pleaded for forgiveness after the incident at school. According to witnesses, she even cried. A girl with that temperament wouldn't have gone off to hide, she would have returned home, begging to be pardoned. Still, she had vanished. When the family emphasized these 3 points, the police finally began to investigate, although not with much urgency. Their first assumption was that Carrie must be with a family member or someone she trusted. That led them to her biological father, Rob. They called him, asking whether he knew anything about Carrie's whereabouts. Rob was shocked. He hadn't seen his daughter in a long time, and now he was learning that she was missing. He immediately sprang into action, demanding answers, returning to the neighborhood, and helping with the search. It quickly became clear that Rob had nothing to do with her disappearance. So, the police returned to square one, the school. At 1:00 p.m., Carrie had been involved in the incident. Someone had thrown paint on her, and she'd responded by hitting him. As a result, one of the teachers decided to expel her for the rest of the week. He issued a disciplinary report, called her mother, and gave Carrie the notice to take home. At approximately 1:30 p.m., Carrie was seen leaving the school. Her house was just 2 minutes away. Somewhere in that brief journey, she disappeared. Whoever took her must have known her, but after countless inquiries, it turned out that no one had seen anything. The case was at a complete standstill, so her parents decided to make as much noise as possible. They printed posters, distributed them throughout the neighborhood and across Milwaukee, and even sent them to local newspapers. Yet still, no one knew anything. No one called. It was at this point that the police began forming hypotheses. The first was that she had run away. The second was that she had an older, secret boyfriend who had taken her. The third was that someone had kidnapped or was hiding her, and that this person was likely a family member. They began investigating the people around her, older men, teenagers, and particularly focused on her stepfather, Fred. He had married her mother 4 years earlier and had recently been having trouble with Carrie. She had grown rebellious, defiant, getting into trouble, and often reminded him that he was not her biological father. To the police, this suggested a possible motive, that Fred had harmed her, perhaps accidentally killed her, or abused her in some way. That he was a dangerous man. But Fred had no criminal record and told police that he loved Carrie as his own daughter. He would never hurt her. Despite her defiance, she was still his little girl. But the police were not interested in hearing it. They had no other suspects, no leads, and so, to them, Fred was the most likely culprit. They began following him, interrogating him frequently. Not long after, they discovered that Fred had been remodeling the garden. He had leveled the ground, replaced the soil, and laid down paving stones. Immediately, the police assumed the worst, believing he had buried a body beneath it. They brought in ground-penetrating radar to search the entire area. But after extensive investigation, they found nothing. And the case once again reached a dead end. Over the years, many people called the police with alleged sightings. Someone had seen her holding hands with a boy on the street, or in a mall, or inside a store. Carrie's mother, Carolyn, once believed she had spotted her. They continued distributing flyers, reaching out to radio stations, television networks, and newspapers. But the weeks passed without any real leads. Eventually, the police decided to revisit Carrie's circle, her family, neighbors, and friends. That's when they identified someone who drew particular attention, none other than the older brother of Carrie's best friend, Johnny Mant, age 17. Johnny was, in many ways, her platonic crush. He was older, her neighbor, and the brother of her closest friend. He was also known as the local bad boy, rebellious and troubled. He was always getting into trouble, smoking, stealing from stores, drinking, skipping class. The entire neighborhood suspected he sold marijuana. Carrie never publicly admitted her feelings for Johnny, but her parents could see it from a mile away, and Johnny knew it too. 2 weeks before she disappeared, Carrie had come home saying Johnny had flirted with her. She claimed she brushed him off, said she didn't play along, but her mother could tell she was infatuated. Given his age, reputation, and proximity, Carrie's parents were understandably uncomfortable with the idea of their daughter being near him. The police developed a theory based on the events of that day. Carrie had passed by Johnny's house, looking sad, holding the report in her hand with her head down. Johnny came out to see what was going on, spoke to her, and invited her in, which Carrie accepted. However, inside the house, Johnny wanted to go further, and when she rejected him, he killed her. With this hypothesis, the police went to the Mann family's house, rang the bell, and Johnny answered. He was taken to the police station, where he was interrogated, but the boy denied the accusations. According to him, Carrie was too young, just his sister's friend, a little girl, and he would never think of touching her. However, his alibi was flimsy. He claimed that on the day of the incident, he was home alone, with no witnesses to corroborate his story. At the same time, there were rumors circulating in the neighborhood about a party at Johnny's house on the day of the crime. The party allegedly involved drugs, alcohol, and underage guests. The rule was to keep everything quiet, avoid peeking through the windows, and not draw attention. If the rumors were true, it's possible that Carrie had entered the party, and tragically, she never left. The police sought witnesses, spoke to Johnny's friends and acquaintances. But everyone denied the existence of such a party, labeling it as a mere rumor with no basis. Weeks turned into months, and then an entire year passed with no progress in the case. No one saw anything, no one heard anything, and the public interest waned. The flyers remained posted around town, but sadly, no one was paying attention. It was as if Carrie Jopek had never existed. No one talked about her, no one mentioned the case, and the story remained stagnant until Friday, September 2, 1983. On that day, a family from the same street hired a contractor to build a swimming pool in their backyard. Different sources provide conflicting details about the project. Some claim it was for a pool, but according to a documentary, the plan was to demolish the entire back porch, which took up the whole yard. The man in charge was Conrad, who came to the house, took measurements, and prepared an estimate. After several weeks, the design was finalized, and on that Friday, work began. The first task was to level the ground, and once that was done, Conrad started digging. When he began working on the lower part of the porch, where the soil was uneven, he came across something hard, something that appeared to be a bone. As he continued digging, he uncovered a body. Realizing what he had found, he immediately called the police. In moments, the entire street was sealed off, filled with officers, journalists, photographers, and curious onlookers. The most frequently heard phrase at the time was, "It was clear." The house in question was none other than the Mann family home. The same surname as Carrie Jopek's best friend and the boy Carrie had liked, Johnny Mant. According to witnesses, when Johnny learned about the discovery, he began vomiting uncontrollably. He was pale, dizzy, and clearly distressed. It could have been from the shock, the confusion, or possibly even from feelings of guilt and fear. The police took him to the station and interrogated him, but once again, he stuck to his story. He hadn't spoken to Carrie, hadn't taken her to his house, didn't know anything, and had no idea how the body ended up where it was. The evidence against him remained circumstantial, and they hoped that the autopsy would reveal more. The body revealed little. The cause of death was attributed to 2 broken vertebrae, specifically between the C1 and C2 in the neck area. However, the coroner was unable to determine the exact cause. It could have been a result of someone stepping on her neck, a strong blow, or even a fall that led to the break. Due to the decomposition, further details could not be determined. With no new information from the body, the authorities turned their focus to the crime scene. Witnesses mentioned a secret party, which Johnny was rumored to have hosted that day. Perhaps Johnny did not kill Carrie, nor did he even see her, but someone else who attended the party might have done so. Once again, Johnny denied hosting any party, and his friends confirmed the same. However, a neighbor, Mitchell, came forward. He had witnessed a bizarre scene on the day the body was found. Amidst the crowd of reporters, curious onlookers, and police officers, there was a teenage boy kneeling on the ground, praying and crying. He was not a friend of Carrie or Johnny, just another local resident. His behavior was inexplicable. The police approached him, and he revealed his name, José Ferreira, a 17-year-old who lived across from Carrie's house and next to Johnny's. José admitted that he had never been close to Carrie or Johnny, but she had been his neighbor, and her disappearance had deeply affected him. José explained that he wasn't invited to any party hosted by Johnny, as they weren't friends. The police then asked him about Johnny's rumored party, but José was unaware of any such event. His strange behavior puzzled them, yet he seemed genuinely moved by Carrie's death. For 33 years, the case stagnated without any new leads, and the police feared it might never be solved. The focus remained on Johnny, who was known for his rebellious behavior and history of drug and alcohol use. Then, on Sunday, October 11, 2015, a journalist named Justin Adams, working at WSN-TV News, received a phone call that would change everything. At first, he assumed it was a routine call, but the voice on the other end sent chills down his spine. The man on the phone stated, "I want to confess." Initially, Justin thought it was a prank, but he decided to let the caller continue. What followed was a detailed account of Carrie's murder, along with an even stranger revelation. The man claimed that the ghost of Carrie had been haunting him for the past 30 years, and he could no longer bear the guilt, forcing him to come forward with the truth. The harassment had become unbearable to the point where he was contemplating ending his life. When the call ended, Justin felt a churn in his stomach, still skeptical about the truth of the story. Nevertheless, he contacted the police. But the officers were not convinced. It was an anonymous call, and they dismissed it as either a prank or meaningless. They decided not to investigate further. However, 2 days later, the man who had made the call showed up at a police station and repeated the same story. He had killed Carrie Jopek and could no longer bear the guilt. 30 years had passed, and the case was nearly forgotten. The officers at the station had no recollection of Carrie Anne's name and didn't recognize the case. They divided their efforts, with one team investigating the details of the information he had provided, while another team focused on questioning the man himself. The detective assigned to this task was none other than Jim Hensley. Once they were alone in the interrogation room, Jim's first question was for the man's name. He introduced himself as José Ferreira, the teenager who had once kneeled, cried, and prayed in front of the Manthouse. José confessed that, on the day of the incident, a secret party had been held at the Manthouse. The party was hush-hush, no one could talk about it because everyone there was a minor and drugs had been consumed. The unspoken rule was that if they wanted more parties, they had to keep quiet. José was not friends with Johnny Mant, nor was he invited, but he still managed to sneak in. He obeyed the rules, kept quiet, and at one point saw Carrie Anne pass by. He had been in love with her for a long time. For some reason, she seemed lost, sad, and holding a paper in her hand. She had no one to talk to and, seeing José alone, approached him to ask if he had alcohol, as the older kids had told her that it would help her relax. José responded that he didn't have alcohol, but he had marijuana, which could serve the same purpose. He handed her the marijuana, and they moved away from the group. They went near the basement door, which was a well-known spot for illicit activities during Johnny's parties. It was rumored that anything could happen down there. What we don't know is whether Carrie Anne was aware of this or not, but what is clear is that, at that moment, the girl was desperate, sad, and confused about whether she should go home and apologize or stay there. Seeing how distressed she was, José invited her to the basement, as it would be quieter there. They opened the door, and she walked in front of him, heading downstairs. But the basement was dark, and remember, Carrie Anne had a fear of the dark. As they descended, she panicked, stopped, and said, "I don't know if this is a good idea." But José insisted. At this point, Carrie Anne wanted to leave. She had second thoughts and was frightened, but José became forceful, grabbing her arms and pushing her. They argued, and in the heat of the struggle, he shoved her. She lost her balance and tumbled down the stairs, hitting her head against an iron railing before landing at the foot of the staircase. In that moment, José could have called for help, but he assumed that Carrie Anne was unconscious and believed that, when she woke up, he didn't want to have anything to do with her. He had been given a chance and squandered it. The girl he had liked was now someone he could never look at again. He decided that the moment had come to get rid of her. He approached her at the bottom of the stairs, touched her, and realized she wasn't breathing. From there, he began to plan his escape. At first, he thought about leaving her body there and running away, but he knew that when they found her, they would know it was him. So, he came up with a plan to hide the body. From the basement, he could access the backyard through a small door. He grabbed a shovel and dug a small hole beneath the back porch. From inside the house, this area wasn't visible, so the people at the party wouldn't notice. He would finish the hole, leave the shovel, go back inside, carry the body out, and bury it. He did exactly that, and supposedly, no one knew. However, his conscience weighed heavily on him. When posters with the girl's photo were put up around town, José decided to help the family. He knocked on doors, handed out flyers, and supported them. José became involved from the very beginning, which gave him some peace of mind. But a year later, the body was discovered, and from that moment on, the supposed ghost of Carrie began to haunt him. He felt her presence everywhere, in his dreams, in his nightmares. He felt intense cold out of nowhere, saw shadows. He was convinced that Carrie's ghost was haunting him. In order to avoid seeing or feeling it, he turned to alcohol. As the years went on, the haunting intensified, affecting every aspect of his life. Every relationship he had fell apart because he could not express himself freely. He couldn't talk about what he had gone through, what he was feeling. He isolated himself, and in 2015, his wife asked for a divorce because a wall had formed between them. That was when José confessed everything, to her, to an emergency hotline, to a journalist from a news channel. Finally, on October 13, he went to the police station and confessed the crime, repeating that he could no longer bear it. He couldn't undo what had happened and was deeply sorry from the bottom of his heart. Some believe that the guilt led José to suffer from mental disorders, hallucinations, voices, and constant nightmares. Others think the ghost was just a mental manifestation. What's important, however, is that the man was sent to prison. Judge Jeffrey Cohen sentenced him to the maximum penalty, 5 years for attempted sexual assault and 2 additional years for illegal imprisonment. Many think this sentence was unjust, but now it's your turn. What do you think of the case? Do you believe justice was served, or does the sentence not make sense? Well, folks, that's it for today's video. I hope you found the case interesting, and if you did, please leave a like and a comment below, sharing your opinion on the case. Do you really think Carrie's ghost haunted José, or was it just guilt? Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.